was there any degree of influence upon these women from, let's say, Woodrow Wilson's wife, who essentially took over for him when he was incapacitated, or the great work that Eleanor Roosevelt had done in leading Franklin to do some reforms that he was reluctant to take on, or Frances Perkins, the first woman to be in the cabinet. Where there are numerous examples of great women who were really doing things, and you're providing us with such great examples. I always think to myself, who were their teachers, who were their models, who were their influences? Thank you.
Romy and I joked that we were part of a wave of books that by the time our book finally happened, the wave would have finished. And it hasn't finished because of exactly what you're saying. It turns out that in the 20s and 30s, unbeknownst to, people of our generations, women were awesome in any number of industries, in the government, in the movies, in TV, there's a book that did come out exactly simultaneous to us, the women who ran Bergdorf's and I forget which one, Baumwitz, and one more store. Bendel. And these books are gonna keep on coming. And for certain, there was sort of, it went backward after this generation, and so this generation didn't get written about. But for sure, these women were not isolated at MoMA. They were part of a societal, whether they're looking at Frances Perkins or whomever, a societal consciousness of this is what women can do, not without great adversity, but yeah, this was such an inspiring era. Women in every field.
Yeah, and that's such a great question, and we really tried to weave the stories, the kind of peripheral stories in as well to this book. I mean, the names, even Frances Perkins and Eleanor Roosevelt, come up in the book because that was the small world that this was at the time. And also one thing we really wanted to make sure came through was that MoMA was not the only place, and when you think of the art world, or even the art world in New York, where women were inventing fields and defining roles, and it was just one of many places, and we hoped to some extent weave those women's stories through as well. For instance, the women who were at the Whitney Museum, Juliana Force, excuse me, thank you, was the first director of the Whitney Museum, let alone, Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney herself. So MoMA was just one of many places in New York and just in the small art world at the time that was filled with sort of fascinating women who were ambitious and were really running the show.
We'll give a plug, we're generous, for the Morgan Library, who next month opens a show on Belle de Costa Green. Its first director became director when it was founded in 1924. A black woman, passing as white at that time, her whole life, but remarkable. This was who J.P. Morgan entrusted first for 20 years to be his personal curator, and then to direct his new museum. We have another question here, and then I think we'll let you all go have a drink.
Yeah, thank you. Just to take that up a little bit and bring it to the modern, when you think about the architects, the Bauhaus architects and their women, their spouses, who were so influential, who really were part of what was going on here, and also that groundbreaking show in the 1950s. So were they involved in influencing, having any say, being women, how those things played out?
How which things played out?
How that exhibition played out, how the fact that the architecture that they were showing, or the architectural artifacts, had some basis on some of the women that were the spouses of those particular famous men.
And which show are you talking about?
Well, the 1950 show with Pollock, where everybody came out, I don't remember the name of the show, but that was basically where Pollock and everyone came to the forefront
Okay.
of modern painting.
Okay, so I would say absolutely. One of the things that, and this is maybe an indirect answer to your question, a whole other sub-theme of this is that the women in power at the museum, in all of these various roles, rarely did it extend to advocating the work of women artists. Right, that was like a step too far. And so their championship of the avant-garde in architecture and painting in any field and film, for the most part, was confined to the kind of assumptions of importance that they inherited from men at that point, or maybe they just felt like it wouldn't even be worth trying to advance this woman architect or this woman painter or this woman, printmaker as part of their work. And yet, and this is kind of answering your question, I think, sort of implicitly and sort of between the lines, they stretched things in a way that things would not have been stretched were they not there, right? Does that make, that makes sense to me even today. Like, you know how to make things a little more open, a little more possible.
It's baby steps.
It's baby steps, and it's very knowing, and I think that's another thing that came out, from getting to know these women. They knew what they were doing. They, they were aware of the power they had, and they were aware of how to use it so that they could continue to wield it. And again, just going back to one of the things that sustained our kind of parameter for including somebody in the book, it's not just that she was powerful at MoMA. She made an impact on the field nationally and internationally, whatever her field was. If it was inventing that you should use index cards, to register new acquisitions, like that too. And so that's the way that they were able to innovate, by them maybe kind of very carefully walking a tightrope. Does that?
Yes, it does. I have a quick question.
Yeah.
The name Museum of Modern Art is generous. It's not a family name. It's a
Yeah.
name. Did a woman, who gave the museum its name?
The three founders, who, by the way, there's not a single photograph of together.
Sarah Newmeyer wasn't on the
She
staff.
wasn't on the staff yet, or there would have been but it was the Museum of Modern Art from the get-go, and it absolutely could have been, if they had wanted it to be, the Rockefeller Museum of Modern Art, because the money was largely theirs at the outset, and for quite a bit early on. But it was decided that it was, more like a public institution, even though it was indeed from then till today, through today, a entirely private institution.
But I also think it really speaks to the sort of how the founders as women saw their role, which was not to be,
Not about them.
it wasn't about them. They weren't trying to, I think they really felt that it was their job to be modest, to not bring attention to themselves. One of the things that comes up.
I'll tell you what, get you fired.
Exactly. And that comes up throughout, throughout the stories. that there was this real feeling that that was not appropriate. And one of the things, you know, we often go back to is that, you know, these three women, Abby Aldridge Rockefeller, Lily P. Bliss, Mary Quinn Sullivan, came together to found the museum. But one of the first things they did was find a man to be the president of the board of trustees because they didn't feel that it was appropriate for them to do so.
Let alone be the director.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Just a quick observation, if I may.
Yes.
Looking at this photograph, I'm thinking if the movie was ever made, that person would be played by Katharine Hepburn.
Oh, absolutely.
It encompasses the whole, you know, the film with Spencer Tracy where she played the librarian in the corporation, and he was bringing in this computer. And
No, it's so true.
Katharine Hepburn, that's Katharine Hepburn.
Well, we couldn't agree more. Romy and I geeked out on 1930s movies during this because the echoes were just so strong. And movie studios at that time were run by women. There's a book about that out as well, called Nobody's Girl Friday. Nobody's Girl Friday. Before movie studios got big and important. So, yeah, we love Katharine Hepburn for Elodie Porter. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.